Welcome back to Join Clara for today's episode about Donald Trump and the Iran war. How a war that was supposed to be quick started looking like a very expensive exit strategy. There's an old rule in politics that people love to forget: starting a war is easy, ending one is where the real bill comes due. And right now, if you look at the signs coming out of Washington, the Middle East, and the global oil market, it really does feel like this war is starting to wobble toward an awkward, messy ending. The ending nobody wants to call a retreat, so everyone starts inventing new words for it. Strategic repositioning, mission transition, controlled de-escalation, temporary force adjustment. Normal people call it leaving. That's the strange thing about the Iran war Trump unexpectedly kicked into motion. It began with thunder, declarations, headlines, and all the usual fireworks that make modern conflicts look almost cinematic for the first week. But now, a month in, it seems to be standing at one of those classic historical crossroads where every option looks bad, and the least bad one, the best among the worst, is usually the one politicians try hardest not to admit. The whole thing now seems to boil down to two possibilities. The first is the gambler's option, which, if we're being honest, is never entirely off the table with Trump. Double down. Throw in the Marines, the airborne divisions, more naval power, more airstrikes, more pressure, more ultimatums, and hope that one final overwhelming blow forces Iran to blink. It's the sort of move that sounds bold in a speech and terrifying in reality. Maybe it works. Maybe Tehran calculates that the costs are too high and decides to cut a deal. But the more likely scenario, and history has a rather rude habit of siding with this one, is that the United States walks directly into the kind of grinding, nationalist, ground-level resistance that great powers always underestimate. In the comments section of a previous DFTW video, a viewer says Iran is not another Vietnam but more formidable. We agree. Countries don't just collapse because their buildings fall apart. You can bomb infrastructure. You can decapitate leadership. You can disrupt command systems. What you cannot bomb out of existence is a national sense of humiliation and revenge. That's where wars stop being military operations and start becoming generational problems. Like Japan and China. Like France and Germany. Like the US and many other countries, including Iran. And Iran is not exactly a country that is easy terrain for foreign armies. Mountainous geography. Deep ideological networks. Regional proxies. A population that, whatever its internal political divisions, tends to become very unified when attacked from outside. History has already shown what happens when foreign powers venture into difficult terrain, believing that superior technology automatically translates into political victory. Afghanistan was supposed to be manageable. The Soviets and Americans both left without grace. Vietnam was supposed to be containable. People only see American heroes in Hollywood movies. Those words aged poorly. So that brings us to the second possibility, and frankly, this one feels more likely. Trump walks away, his arrogant head remaining aloft. Or, to put it more politely in the language of geopolitics, Trump seeks an expedient conclusion. Now, if you listen to his recent public remarks, the tone is fascinating. On March 31st, he essentially said that countries unable to access aviation fuel due to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz should buy from the United States instead. Classic Trump. So glad he was not born in China. Thank God. War, crisis, instability, global energy panic, and somehow there's still a sales pitch in the middle of it. If the strait is blocked, he suggests, either go take it back yourselves or buy American oil. That line almost writes its own satire. Imagine the scene. The global energy system is shaking. Tankers are hesitating. Insurance rates are exploding. Markets are panicking. And the response from Washington sounds suspiciously close to: have you considered shopping with us, the US? That's the businessman-president instinct in its purest form. There's something almost darkly funny about it. A geopolitical crisis turns into a commercial opportunity. It's very on brand. Then he adds that America won't keep helping countries that didn't help America. Again, that familiar transactional worldview. Alliances, in this framing, are not built on strategic architecture, post-war norms, or shared security interests. They're treated almost like loyalty points. Did you support us enough? If your answer is not positive, mind your steps and good luck. And then came the really telling part. He suggested the Strait of Hormuz would automatically reopen, and that America would be leaving in 2 or 3 weeks because Iran had effectively admitted defeat, and was seeking an agreement, which the Iranian side firmly denied. It is where things start to sound less like a coherent strategic statement, and more like someone trying to narrate the ending they wish had happened. Because wars do not automatically end just because one side says they should. Especially not wars in the Middle East. Especially not wars involving Iran. Especially not wars that have already caused deep casualties, including lovely daughters and loving mothers. The idea that you can declare victory and leave is politically convenient, but reality is usually less cooperative. Still, from Trump's perspective, the logic is understandable. He wants to claim that America has already won. According to this narrative, the leadership in Iran has been sufficiently disrupted, regime goals have been achieved, and whatever comes next is someone else's problem. That is a familiar pattern in modern warfare. Victory gets defined downward until it becomes compatible with departure. At first, the goal is total strategic transformation. Then it becomes deterrence. Then degradation. Then stabilization. Then a safe exit. Eventually, we won means we found a way to leave without admitting we lost. That's not uniquely Trumpian, by the way. It's practically a tradition in major power interventions. But Trump adds his own flair to it. The flair is bluntness. Where previous administrations might bury the retreat in pages of diplomatic language, Trump is perfectly capable of saying, in effect, "We're done here, you deal with it." That's what makes this moment so ironic. The war may have been initiated unexpectedly, but it may also end exactly as people should have expected from him, abruptly, loudly, and with a victory speech attached. The problem is that the world after departure might be even messier. Because, let's be honest, why did Iran move to block the Strait of Hormuz? It didn't happen in a vacuum. The conflict escalated because of direct pressure and military action from the United States and Israel. So now Washington may be stepping back while the consequences continue to burn. That's a tough sell internationally. Especially because the longer this drags on, the worse the domestic politics become. Oil prices rise. Inflation climbs. Gasoline costs start climbing in North America. And once that happens, ordinary voters who may not know the strategic map of the Persian Gulf suddenly become deeply interested in foreign policy. Nothing educates the public on geopolitics faster than expensive fuel. That is where Trump's political instincts probably start flashing warning lights. A prolonged war means rising prices. Rising prices mean angry households. Angry households mean trouble in elections. That's where the Republican midterms start looming over every military decision. Wars are often sold on security grounds, but they are ended on polling grounds. And if public frustration turns sharply enough, impeachment talk starts floating around again. Not just because of military failure, but because domestic economic pain translates into political vulnerability. We talked about this in detail in the video posted 2 days ago. Watch it for more if you haven't done so. Now, let us look at the international side, where things become even more awkward. Traditional allies are no longer lining up automatically. The United Kingdom, France, and Germany have all shown visible discomfort. That alone is significant. When your closest partners publicly step back, it signals that the coalition architecture isn't holding. Even countries that are normally extremely cautious about challenging Washington seem hesitant. Japan, for example, might speak firmly in public, but when the conversation turns to actual deployment and military escort responsibilities, the enthusiasm appears to cool. Sanai Takaichi, more lovely toward Trump than his lover, was suddenly showing utmost frugality. That tells you everything. Talking is cheap. Sending forces is expensive. And then comes the nightmare scenario for any American administration: ground entanglement. On paper, the United States and Israel absolutely hold overwhelming technological advantages. Air power, precision strikes, ISR capabilities, naval assets. No serious observer disputes that. But ground wars are different. Terrain matters. Culture matters. Motivation matters. Iran's geography alone makes any sustained ground operation deeply unattractive. Then add nationalism, historical memory, and asymmetrical tactics. Suddenly, the cost curve becomes horrifying. It is where the ghosts of past wars begin whispering. Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam, and even Korea. No politician wants to see those comparisons trending. Trump, for all his unpredictability, is not politically naive. Not that stupid yet. He understands risk. He understands optics. And above all, he understands when the numbers start looking ugly. So yes, he talks tough. But when the strategic arithmetic stops adding up, he is far more likely to sprint for the exit than to keep feeding troops into a deepening mess. The bigger question, though, is whether he can actually leave cleanly. That's where the irony turns sharper. Because America can physically leave. Of course it can. But politically, strategically, and economically, leaving is not the same thing as being free of the consequences. The Middle East after such a withdrawal would be absolute chaos. The Gulf states would be furious. For years, they hosted American forces under the assumption that this presence guaranteed security. Instead, once the conflict escalated, they found themselves absorbing missile and drone retaliation while U.S. forces largely sheltered in secured compounds. From their perspective, the arrangement is not as planned. Instead of America protecting them, they are hosting the consequences of America's war. That changes relationships. It changes trust. And it may change the future of the petrodollar system as well. Because if security guarantees begin to look unreliable, regional players start hedging. And when regional powers hedge, they diversify strategic partnerships. That's where other powers begin entering the conversation. Israel, meanwhile, is in an even more difficult position. Without strong American backing, the long-term sustainability of a drawn-out confrontation becomes much harder. Iran's missile and drone capacities may degrade over time, but degrade does not mean disappear. Israel is a highly capable state, but it is also relatively small. Long wars of attrition are inherently exhausting. So from Jerusalem's perspective, any sudden American departure would feel dangerously destabilizing. Moreover, the country is facing a final exam before its 80th anniversary, which many people believe may never come. That means enormous pressure to keep Washington engaged. And if necessary, pressure to escalate further. That is how wars deepen. No one actor wants to be left alone holding the consequences. Iran, for its part, has every reason not to let the United States walk away without cost. After casualties, infrastructure destruction, and leadership losses, there is both strategic and emotional momentum toward continued retaliation. That may not mean conventional confrontation. In fact, it probably doesn't. It means economic leverage, regional proxies, strategic pressure, and above all, Hormuz. The strait remains the single most powerful pressure point. Close it, threaten it, or merely make passage uncertain, and the entire world begins to feel the consequences. Oil spikes. Shipping hesitates. Insurance premiums surge. Markets wobble. And countries have to buy the passage of their tankers with Iran's money. So suddenly, it is not just an American problem or an Iranian problem. It becomes everybody's problem. Which is precisely why wars are so terrifying. They began with the illusion of control. Someone in a room believed the variables were manageable, especially after he had just captured another country's president so easily just weeks ago. But once conflict starts moving, be it the Iran war or others, it obeys its own momentum. It stops following anyone's script. That's the real lesson here. Starting a war is easy because it's a decision. Ending a war is hard because it becomes a process shaped by millions of reactions. Domestic reactions. Allied reactions. Enemy reactions. Market reactions. Public reactions. Everyone gets a vote once the missiles start flying. And now the peace process, ironically, may depend less on Washington than on outside mediation. That's where the geopolitical humor becomes almost too perfect to suppress laughter. Trump, who loves talking about his supposed ability to settle global conflicts, may now need other countries to help resolve the war he ignited, as a so-called peace-loving U.S. president who could not get even a used Nobel Peace Prize. There is something deeply ironic in that. The self-proclaimed dealmaker is now expecting others to make the deal. China and Pakistan stepping in with calls for a ceasefire, negotiations, protection of civilian targets, safe waterways, and respect for the UN framework introduces an entirely different layer. Whether one agrees with every geopolitical implication or not, the symbolism matters. The West starts the fire. The East is now seen trying to organize the extinguisher. That image carries enormous diplomatic weight. And then there's Trump's rhetorical style throughout all this. The ultimatums. The threats. The shifting deadlines. One day it's a final warning. Then the deadline moves 5 days. Then 10. Then the tone softens. Then suddenly the conversation is about leaving. It creates a sense of strategic improvisation. Some might call it flexibility. Others might call it chaos. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Trump thrives in uncertainty because it becomes leverage itself. But the problem is that uncertainty also erodes trust. Allies stop knowing what the plan is. Markets stop knowing what the risk horizon is. Adversaries start testing boundaries. At a certain point, unpredictability stops being a strength and starts becoming instability. That may be the biggest story here. Not whether America technically wins or loses, but whether its allies still believe Washington can be counted on to see a crisis through coherently. Because once followers begin making their own calculations, the leader is no longer truly leading. And that seems to be happening. Countries that once moved quickly in pursuit of U.S. initiatives now appear more cautious. Some openly refuse requests. Others issue diplomatic statements that carefully create distance. That is not just disagreement. That is strategic repositioning. It means the world is adjusting to the possibility that American leadership may now come with more volatility than reassurance. It may reshape alliance psychology. It may accelerate financial diversification. It may deepen energy realignment. And yes, it may strengthen the perception that power is becoming more fragmented globally. And in that sense, this war could have consequences far beyond Iran. As we said in the video titled, Iran War Proves China's Waiting Game Strategy is Working. Click the link to watch it if you missed that episode. So where does this end? Honestly, probably exactly where so many wars end. Not with a clear victory. Not with a dramatic surrender. Not with the grand ending imagined at the start. But with exhaustion. A ceasefire nobody loves. A deal everyone publicly criticizes. A withdrawal framed as success. A region left unstable. Many speeches claimed lessons had been learned. And a lingering question hangs over it all. Was this ever supposed to end well? Because from the beginning, the assumptions behind rapid intervention always seemed dangerously optimistic. Quick war. Fast pressure. Immediate political collapse. History rarely rewards that kind of confidence. So yes, Trump may run. He may declare victory on the way out. He may tell the world the hard part is over. But wars have a nasty habit of leaving receipts long after the speeches are done. And that, more than anything, is what makes this moment feel so expected. Unexpected wars often end in the most predictable way imaginable, with everyone insisting they won, while quietly looking for the nearest exit.